I want to tell you about the folder. It was a manila folder, the kind with the little metal prong at the top for fasteners. My daughter-in-law Diane put it together. She is thorough. She is the kind of person who uses tabs, and she drove out to Fort Wayne in October, and she sat down at my kitchen table with that folder, and she said, "Dad, we've been doing some research." And she opened it up and slid the first page across to me. Sunrise Gardens Assisted Living, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Private room with bathroom. Meals, housekeeping, daily wellness check, activity programming. 24-hour staff. Monthly fee, $6,200. I looked at that number for a long time. $6,200 per month for a room. My Social Security is $2,040 a month. My small pension from 31 years at Lincoln Financial kicks in another $680. Total income, $2,720 a month, which means Sunrise Gardens would cost me $2,380 more per month than I actually have, every single month, for the rest of my life. I am 81 years old, and I am not a man who panics easily. I worked in insurance long enough to understand that numbers don't lie, and that the gap between what things cost and what you have is simply a problem to be solved. So I looked at that folder, and I looked at my daughter-in-law, and I said, "Diane, I appreciate this. Let me think." She thought I meant I'd think about Sunrise Gardens. I meant I'd think about everything else. Because here is what I want you to understand. If you are sitting where I was sitting, maybe not at 81, maybe at 73 or 68, but sitting somewhere looking at a number that doesn't add up, there is more than one answer to this problem. The folder on the table was one answer. It wasn't the only one. And the answer I found, 18 months later, sitting on a tiled balcony above a courtyard in Cebu City, Philippines, eating a breakfast that cost me 80 cents, costs $1,100 a month total, everything included. And I have never once in 18 months wished I'd signed the papers at Sunrise Gardens. Not once. My name is Harold Briggs. I am 81 years old. I was born in Muncie, Indiana in 1944, which means I came into the world during a war and grew up during a boom and worked through a recession and retired into a country that had gotten very expensive very fast. I spent 31 years as a claims analyst and then a senior supervisor at Lincoln Financial in Fort Wayne. Desk work mostly. Numbers, policies, exceptions, disputes. I was good at reading the fine print because the fine print is where the truth lives. My wife Ruth and I were married in 1968, 51 years. She was a school librarian, which suited her exactly. She was precise and quiet, and she knew where everything was, and she had strong opinions about which books deserved to be read and which ones were taking up shelf space. She had a specific way of shelving her own books at home, not alphabetically, not by genre, but by some private system that made sense only to her and that she explained to me once in 1979, and which I immediately forgot and never successfully reconstructed. She found this predictable. She was right to. She applied her standards to people too, which is why she had a small circle of friends, and all of them were worth knowing. She was not a woman who collected acquaintances. She preferred depth to breadth in everything. Books, friendships, conversations, soup. She made the best vegetable soup I have ever eaten, and she refused to write down the recipe because she said it was different every time, and writing it down would only mislead people. I have attempted it 12 times since she died. I have not come close. Ruth died in 2019. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis. It was fast enough that there wasn't really time to understand what was happening until it was over, and then it was over, and I was standing in a house in Fort Wayne that was too large and too quiet and smelled like her shampoo for months after, which I did not expect, and which undid me in ways I still don't entirely have words for. We had one son, Thomas. He lives in Columbus with Diane and their two daughters, and he is a good son, conscientious, calls regularly, drove up for every holiday. He is also a son who worries, which is a reasonable thing to do when your father is 81 and living alone in a 4-bedroom house in Indiana, and I understood the worry, and I did not resent it, even when it manifested as a manila folder with tabs. The 2 years after Ruth died were not good years. I don't mean I was in crisis. I was functional, I was fine, I was doing everything a widower does. I ate, I slept, I went to the doctor, I answered the phone, I kept the house, I paid the bills on time, which I always had, because some things hold by habit when nothing else does. But functional and fine are not the same as alive, and I knew the difference because I'd been alive before, and I recognized its absence the way you recognize a room that's had the furniture moved out of it. Same walls, same light, something essential missing. I stopped reading, which was the thing that told me something was genuinely wrong. Ruth and I had always read. Dinner table, bedside, Sunday afternoons in the 2 chairs by the window, matching chairs she'd found at an estate sale in 1991, and reupholstered in a green fabric I never quite liked and she never asked my opinion about, and which I now think were the best chairs I have ever sat in. After she died, I'd pick up a book and look at the words and nothing would happen. Not that I couldn't read. I could read. The sentences went in. They just didn't do anything when they arrived. I'd set the book down. I did this for about 1.5 years before I noticed I'd stopped trying altogether, and there was a particular afternoon when I realized there were no books on my nightstand, and that there hadn't been for months, and that this was a thing that would have alarmed Ruth considerably, and I sat with that for a while. The house got to be too much. Not physically, I managed, I wasn't falling down, but emotionally, the maintenance of it, the scale of it, 4 bedrooms for one man who didn't really need a bedroom so much as a chair to sleep in and a kitchen to boil water. I kept Ruth's study exactly as it was for 14 months because I didn't know what I'd do with it, and because opening the door and seeing her things still arranged the way she'd arranged them was both painful and necessary in a way I couldn't entirely separate. Eventually I closed the door and stopped opening it. That was a different kind of loss, the loss of even the ghost of the arrangement. The property tax came in January and was $3,800. The furnace went in February and cost $2,100 to replace. The driveway needed sealing. The gutters needed cleaning. My neighbor Phil shoveled my walk twice last winter without being asked, and when I thanked him, he looked at me with a gentleness that made me understand I had started to become someone people were quietly monitoring. That is a specific kind of loneliness, the observed kind, the kind where you can feel the concern of others as a form of distance rather than closeness. Thomas and Diane's concern was real, and it was loving, and I want to be clear about that. The folder wasn't cruelty, it was care. They had done the research, they had made the calls, they had identified a facility that was well reviewed and clean and close enough for Thomas to visit monthly. They were trying to solve a problem. The problem was that the solution cost $6,200 a month, and neither they nor I had that. After Diane left with the folder, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I did what I have always done when faced with a problem I don't yet understand. I went looking for information. I am 81 and I am not too old for the internet, despite what my grandson believes. I know how to use a search bar. I typed in affordable retirement abroad, and I spent the next several hours going down what I can only describe as a very specific rabbit hole. The Philippines kept coming up. Not because of one article or one recommendation, because of volume. Forum posts, YouTube channels, Facebook groups, expat blogs written by men who were older than me talking about their daily lives in cities I'd never heard of. Cebu, Dumaguete, Davao. They weren't writing aspirationally. They were writing practically, this is what my electric bill is, this is where I go to the doctor, this is what a month costs. The numbers were so far from anything I expected that I wrote them down on a legal pad and checked them against each other across multiple sources to make sure I wasn't misreading. One-bedroom apartment, $360 to $400 a month. Utilities, electric, water, internet, another $70, $80. Food, $1.50 for a local restaurant lunch. Groceries proportionally cheap. Healthcare, a doctor visit for $15 to $30. A hospital stay that would cost thousands in Indiana running into the low hundreds here. Private hospitals in Cebu, modern, accredited, staffed with physicians, many of whom trained abroad or at Philippine universities with strong international reputations. Total monthly cost, comfortable, including extras, $1,100 to $1,300. My income is $2,720. I got out a second legal pad and I did the math 3 times. Each time the answer was the same. I would have more than $1,500 left over every month. After actually living, not surviving, I found the Facebook expat groups. There were thousands of members, mostly American and British men in their 60s, 70s, 80s, posting photographs of their apartments, their breakfasts, their electric bills, their views. I introduced myself, Harold 80, Fort Wayne, Indiana, considering the move, looking for honest information, and the responses were immediate and detailed and came from men with no reason to mislead me. One man, 79 years old, from Akron, Ohio, living in Cebu for 3 years, sent me a complete spreadsheet of his monthly expenses going back to his first month. He included a column for unexpected costs, a bathroom repair, a medication he hadn't budgeted for, the month he needed new sandals and a replacement fan. Even with the unexpected column, he had never spent more than $1,340 in any single month. I read it like I used to read claims files. Looking for the catch, for the line item that was missing, for the expense that would make the numbers not add up. I didn't find one. I looked up the SRRV, the Special Resident Retirees Visa, issued by the Philippine Retirement Authority specifically for foreign retirees. For applicants over 50, the program requires a deposit into a Philippine bank account. The amount varies depending on whether you want a pension type or regular type visa, and an annual fee that runs about $360. The deposit is yours. It earns interest and can be used for approved expenses like property rental or medical care. The visa gives you indefinite stay without the annual renewal hassle of a tourist extension. It is not a rumor. It is a government program. I confirmed this through multiple independent sources over 6 weeks. I called Thomas on a Sunday. I laid it out the way I'd lay out a case at work. The numbers, the visa, the healthcare data, the expat testimony, the spreadsheet from the man in Akron. I told him I'd been researching for 6 weeks. I told him the math. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Dad, you're 81. I said, "I'm aware." He said, "What if something happens? What if you have a fall? You're alone." I told him I was alone in Fort Wayne too, and that alone in a place that costs $1,100 a month was considerably preferable to alone in a place that costs $6,200. He said, "It's not the same. At least here, we can get to you." I said, "Thomas, at the rate Sunrise Gardens costs, you'd have to liquidate everything I have in 4 years. There would be nothing left. Is that the plan?" That landed. He's a numbers person too. Engineer, precise, methodical. He gets that from me and from Ruth, who balanced a household budget for 51 years without error. We talked for another hour. He had questions I didn't have answers to yet, and I told him so honestly. Diane got on the call and she had different questions about food, about language, about whether there were other English speakers, about how I would manage if I needed medical attention urgently. I answered what I could and told her I'd find out the rest. She said she'd look at flights to come see it before I went. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said, "I know. I want to see it before you go." That was the moment I understood they were genuinely coming around. Not happily, not without fear, but genuinely. They are good people. I flew out of Indianapolis in March, connecting through Tokyo, then into Cebu. Total travel time, just under 24 hours, which is a long time to be in the air at any age, and a very long time to be in the air at 81. I had a wheelchair assist arranged at both connecting airports, which I recommend without any embarrassment whatsoever. The assist staff are efficient and kind, and they move you through customs and immigration without the long-standing lines, which at my age is not a small comfort. I will tell you the honest truth about that flight. Somewhere over the Pacific, in the dark, at whatever hour it was in whatever time zone we were crossing, I had a conversation with myself. Not out loud, internal. The kind of conversation you have when no one can hear you, and so you can be as afraid as you actually are. "What are you doing, Harold? You are 81 years old. You have never been to Asia. You do not speak the language. You are flying toward a city you have only seen on a screen, where you know no one, to live in an apartment you have only seen in photographs, and Ruth is not here to talk you out of it or into it, or to sit in the other seat and read her book and make you feel like the decision was reasonable because she was part of it." I sat with that for a long time. And then I thought, Ruth was a woman who believed that you did not give up the thing that made you yourself just because things got difficult. She said this explicitly, more than once, in contexts that had nothing to do with moving to Asia, about a colleague of hers who took early retirement and shrank, about a friend who sold the piano because she'd gotten out of practice. You did not give up the thing that made you yourself. I heard her say it as clearly as if she were in the seat beside me. And the thing that made me myself, it turned out, was not the house in Fort Wayne. It was curiosity, the capacity to go toward something rather than waiting for it to arrive. I looked out the window and there was nothing but dark. An hour later, descending into Cebu, there was light. The city spread out below in the early morning, yellow and orange and white, the harbor and the hills behind it, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was curiosity. Actual curiosity. Not anxiety dressed up as curiosity. I wanted to know what was down there. That was enough. Cebu City arrived like it was trying to introduce itself to all 5 senses simultaneously. Hot. Immediately. Completely. A heat that is not aggressive so much as total. The way being submerged is total. I stepped out of the terminal and my glasses fogged. A man in a yellow vest appeared at my elbow, airport staff, wheelchair assist for departures, and steered me toward the taxi rank with the calm authority of someone who has done this 10,000 times. The taxi driver's name was Ronnie. He drove me to the apartment in a neighborhood called La Hug on the elevated side of the city, with a view over rooftops toward the water. He talked the entire way, about the traffic, about a festival that was coming up, about a restaurant near my street, that he said served the best kinilaw in the city, and that I should go on a Tuesday when the fish was freshest. I understood about 70% of this because his English was very good, and the 30% I missed didn't matter because the energy of it mattered. He was welcoming me, specifically, to his city, with the warmth of someone who thinks that where he lives is worth being excited about. He was right. The apartment was on the second floor of a building on a quiet side street, up a flight of tiled stairs with a metal railing I held onto. The building manager, a woman named Mrs. Reyes, was waiting with the key. She was perhaps 60, efficient, with reading glasses pushed up on her head that she never actually used while I was there. She showed me the unit, 1 bedroom, sitting area, kitchen, bathroom with a shower, a ceiling fan, a window air conditioner, a small balcony with a plastic chair, and a view of a courtyard where there was a bougainvillea in full flower, purple, more purple than I had ever seen a plant be. The rent was 22,000 pesos a month. At the exchange rate that week, that was $395. $395 for an apartment with a balcony and a bougainvillea. I had been paying $1,400 a month for the Fort Wayne house, not counting utilities, not counting the property tax that arrived every year in a lump that always surprised me, despite the fact that I had paid it for decades. Here, $395. I did the math standing in the kitchen while Mrs. Reyes showed me which burner ran hot. I did it automatically, the way a claims analyst does math. Reflex, not deliberation. The number was real. I checked it 3 times. Let me take you through the rest of it, because this is the part people need to hear clearly. Electric, I run the ceiling fan most of the time, the air conditioner at night and during the hottest afternoon hours in the hot months. My bill has run between 900 and 1,200 pesos, call it $17 to $22 a month. In Fort Wayne in January, my gas and electric together ran $260 in the cold months. Water, 280 pesos, $5. Internet, fast, reliable enough for video calls with Thomas and the grandchildren, streaming, everything I need, 1,600 pesos, $29. Phone, local SIM, prepaid, around 500 pesos, $9. Food is where I want to spend some time, because food here is one of the genuine daily surprises of my life, and I do not use the word surprise lightly at 81, because genuine surprise becomes rarer as you get older, and its presence is worth noting when it arrives. There is a woman named Aling Cora who runs a small carinderia, an open-front eatery, steam trays behind glass, 2 blocks from my building. She opens at 6:30. By 7 she has rice, 2 or 3 viands, a soup. I go most mornings. A full breakfast, rice, a piece of dying nabangas, which is fried milkfish marinated in garlic and vinegar, a cup of soup, comes to about 75 pesos. That is $1.35 for breakfast, a real one, not a granola bar over the kitchen sink. Lunch at the same place or a similar one runs 60 to 90 pesos. Adobo sinigang, a vegetable dish with garlic. The food is not timid, it has opinions. It took me 2 weeks to calibrate my tolerance for the heat of some dishes, not temperature heat, chili heat, and Aling Cora found this mildly amusing and would watch my face with quiet interest when she introduced something new. She has a particular expression when she serves something she knows will challenge me. I have learned to read it and to proceed anyway, because she has not yet been wrong about what was worth trying. There is a market nearby, a real one, covered, vendors in stalls, produce piled in ways that suggest genuine abundance rather than careful arrangement, where I do my grocery shopping on Tuesday and Friday mornings. The tomatoes are better than anything I found at the Kroger in Fort Wayne. I don't know how to explain the difference except to say that they taste like tomatoes are supposed to taste, which is a thing I had mostly forgotten was possible. Dinner I vary. Some nights I cook. I have learned 3 Filipino dishes by watching Aling Cora, and by asking questions she answered patiently in the manner of someone who has taught cooking to people who needed teaching. I make a serviceable sinigang now. Thomas ate 2 bowls of it when he visited, and looked surprised, which is the highest praise I can imagine from a man who ate his mother's cooking for 30 years. On Friday evenings, I take Ronnie's taxi down to a restaurant near the waterfront, where I have a standing table at the far end, out of the wind but with a view of the harbor, and they bring me grilled tuna collar and rice and a San Miguel without my ordering, because I have been coming every Friday for 15 months, and that is what I have. My total monthly food spend, cooking and eating out combined, runs about $230 to $260. Incidentals, transportation, the occasional taxi, a haircut, household supplies, a book from the second-hand shop on Colon Street, a San Miguel on a Friday, a small gift for Manny's son when he passed his semester exams, another 100, $110. Grand total, $1,100, sometimes $1,090, rarely over $1,120. I have $1,620 left from my income every month. After 18 months, that has become a cushion I did not have when I was paying for the Fort Wayne house. Now, about the life itself, because the numbers are the reason to come. The life is the reason to stay. I want to tell you about Father Ignacio. He is not actually a priest. That is just what the men at the coffee shop call him, because he speaks in long, considered sentences and has views on everything and delivers them as though they have been thought through carefully, which they have. His actual name is Ignacio Santos. He is 74 years old. He is Filipino, retired professor of economics from the University of San Carlos, and he comes to a small coffee shop on V. Rama Avenue every morning at 8 o'clock, and he sits at a table by the window and he orders the same coffee and he reads whatever he is currently reading, and he is available for conversation if you sit down and are worth talking to. I found that coffee shop on my 4th day. I sat at a table by the window with my coffee. Strong, dark, local, 60 pesos, better than anything I paid $4 for in Fort Wayne. And a man at the next table looked over and said, in perfectly clear English, "You're new." I said I was. He said, "Where from?" I said, "Indiana." He said, "Fort Wayne or Indianapolis?" I said, "Fort Wayne," and was surprised enough to say so. And he said he had spent a semester at Purdue in 1974 and remembered Indiana the way one remembers a long, flat dream, specifically and without longing. He laughed at his own description. I laughed too. That was Father Ignacio. I have had coffee with him most mornings for 18 months. We talk about economics. He taught it for 40 years and has thoughts that are not always comfortable to disagree with, though I have tried, and about books. That conversation opened up the first week when I mentioned I'd been having trouble reading after my wife died and had only recently started again, tentatively, the way you test weight on an ankle you've turned. He did not offer sympathy, which I appreciated. He offered a title. He slid a worn paperback across the table, a novel I hadn't read, by a Filipino writer I'd never heard of, and said, "Start here." I did. I finished it in 4 days. He was waiting with the next one when I arrived at the coffee shop on the morning after I finished. He had anticipated the pace. He said nothing about it, just put the book on the table and ordered another coffee. I have read 22 books in 18 months. Ruth would have had something to say about the pace. She would have been right, and I would have agreed, and we would have argued about it anyway, and that thought makes me happy now rather than sad, which is a change I did not expect and for which I am grateful. There is also Manny. He is the building's maintenance man, though in practice he is the person who knows where everything is, how everything works, and what to do when it doesn't. He is 47, has a son studying engineering at Cebu Technological University, and checks in on me in a way that doesn't feel like checking in. He stops by to mention that the water pressure on the 2nd floor runs better if I use it before 8, or that there's a fiesta on Saturday 2 streets over, and it will be loud until late but worth going to. He knows I take the stairs slowly, and has, on 2 occasions when my knees were giving me difficulty, appeared in the stairwell as if coincidentally and walked beside me without comment, which is a form of help I find possible to accept. He fixed a leak under my kitchen sink last month without my mentioning it. He noticed the watermark on the cabinet below when he came by to replace a light bulb, and he came back the next morning with tools. The repair took 40 minutes. He would not accept payment for the extra work. I tried twice. He refused twice, pleasantly but completely. I left a bag of mangoes from the market outside his door. He texted me a photograph of his family eating them. That is the transaction I understand here. There is a Sari Sari store at the corner of my street, a small neighborhood shop open all hours, everything from matches to cold drinks to shampoo sachets in small single-use packets, run by a woman everyone calls Ate Belen, which means something close to Sister Belen. She keeps a running tab for the residents of the immediate 2 or 3 buildings, the way corner shops used to operate before they were replaced by things that don't know your name. She knows mine. She calls me Sir Harold, with an emphasis on the sir that manages to feel genuinely respectful rather than performative, which is a tone that is either natural to her or has been cultivated so long it has become natural. My preferred brand of instant coffee was not something she stocked before I arrived. She simply began ordering it when she noticed I bought it regularly, without discussion, without asking me to pre-order it, without making it a transaction of any visible kind. It was just there one morning, in the right spot on the shelf. These are not exotic experiences. They are neighborhood experiences. The kind of daily, ordinary, known-by-name interactions that used to exist everywhere and have become genuinely rare, or rare in the version of the world I was living in, where a grocery self-checkout means you go through an entire errand without speaking to a person, and where 3 days can pass without a real conversation, and no one thinks to ask why. Here, you are known. Not as a curiosity, not as a tourist, not as an elderly foreigner to be managed, as yourself. Sir Harold who reads on the balcony, Sir Harold whose son came and visited and ate 2 bowls of sinigang, Sir Harold who buys the good tomatoes on Tuesdays and takes his coffee at 8 and argues pleasantly with Father Ignacio about things neither of them will concede. I need to tell you about the night I went to the hospital, because if you are of a certain age and you are considering any of this, that is probably the question at the front of your mind, and it deserves a direct answer. It was November, 8 months after I arrived. I woke at 3 in the morning with chest tightness and a feeling I can only describe as interior wrongness, the specific quality of not rightness that at 81 you do not dismiss. I sat up. I assessed. I decided not to wait. I called Manny. He was at my door in 4 minutes. I don't know if he fully sleeps or if he simply holds himself at a level of availability that functions like sleeping. He drove me to Chonghua Hospital, a large private hospital in Cebu City. Clean, well-equipped, modern, and I was in triage within 15 minutes of arriving. They ran a full cardiac workup. ECG, troponin, complete blood panel, chest x-ray. The emergency physician, mid-40s, trained partly in the United States, spoke excellent English without effort, explained every step as it happened, not rushing, not performing explanation for my benefit in a way that suggested I should be reassured. Genuinely explaining, the way you explain things to someone whose understanding matters. At no point did I feel like a problem to be efficiently processed, which is a feeling I had sometimes lost at home, where at my age and in the American system, you can begin to feel like a billing code that has acquired secondary symptoms. The diagnosis, atrial flutter, which I had a history of, aggravated by dehydration and a medication adjustment that I had not managed carefully enough during the first weeks of the changed climate. They gave me fluids and corrected the medication and monitored me for 6 hours until my rhythms were stable and the physician was satisfied. The total bill was 4,800 pesos, $87. I want to say that again because I want it to land properly. An emergency hospital visit at 81 with a cardiac presentation, full workup, 6 hours of monitoring, physician consultation, medication, fluids, $87. The last time I had an analogous visit in Indiana, a non-emergency cardiology appointment plus an ECG and basic blood work, my share after Medicare was over $400. That was a scheduled appointment in a specialist's office in the middle of the afternoon. This was an emergency at 3 in the morning. I called Thomas the next morning from the hospital, once I knew what I was dealing with. He answered immediately. I said, "Thomas, I need to tell you something. I'm in the hospital. I'm completely fine. Everything is under control. And I want to tell you what it cost. He said, Dad, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. $87. There was a pause. He said, total? I said, total. For everything. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, I'll tell Diane. But that's not the thing I think about most from that night. The thing I think about is the nurse who came in at around 4 to check my vitals while we waited for the final readings. Young woman, maybe 25. She checked the numbers, wrote something down, and then she looked at me. Not at the chart, at me. And she said, You scared, sir? I said, a little bit. She pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. She didn't do anything medical. She just sat there with me for a few minutes, in the particular quiet of a hospital at 4 in the morning. And then she said, You remind me of my Lolo, her grandfather. That undid me, in the best way, not in a sad way, in a way that felt like something releasing. Because that is what I had lost back in the gray years in the empty house. Not just Ruth, not just the specific grief of losing her, but the sense of being someone particular to someone, of being seen, specifically, as yourself, by someone who has no obligation to see you, and sees you anyway. You remind me of my Lolo. She said it because it was true, and she thought it might help. It helped. I want to stop here for a moment, because if you're seriously thinking about any of this, getting your legal pad out, running numbers, there's something I put together that I want to mention. I'm not a writer. I want to be clear about that. I'm a claims supervisor. I think in terms of policies, exceptions, and documentation, but over the first year here I kept notes. The numbers, the visa process, the things that surprised me, the mistakes I made, the questions Thomas and Diane asked that I hadn't answered well the first time. I eventually wrote it all out into something resembling a book. I called it The Honest Move. It covers costs, cities, the Survey visa in detail, healthcare, the things people get wrong, the questions your family is going to ask. It is not a sales pitch. It is a legal pad turned into chapters, with the catches included. The link is in the description. No pressure, but if you're the kind of person who needs the numbers before you can picture the thing, I think it might help. All right, the honest downsides deserve as much space as the good parts. The heat is not theoretical. Cebu sits at 10 degrees north of the equator, and in the hot months, March through May especially, the temperature climbs to 33-34 Celsius, which is in the low 90s Fahrenheit, with humidity that makes that number an underestimate of how it actually feels. I have adapted by becoming a man who does his outdoor activity before 9 and after 5, and who regards the midday hours as indoor reading time. This suits me, but you should know the adjustment is real and takes several weeks. The internet is good. The internet is not flawless. There are days when the connection drops during heavy rain, and there are occasional brownouts, rolling power cuts that can last anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. I own a small battery-powered fan and a power bank. This is the reasonable response. Bureaucracy moves at its own pace. The Survey process took longer than the official timeline suggested, not because anyone was obstructive, but because documents needed to be gathered from multiple places, and certain offices have their own schedules. I am a retired claims supervisor. I have some experience with this. But I mention it so you are not surprised. Mobility is something I think about honestly, because at 81 it would be dishonest not to. I chose my building specifically for its manageable stairs, and its location within easy walking distance of everything I regularly need. I walk slowly, and I plan accordingly. Ronnie takes me anywhere beyond walking distance. There are days when my knees are less cooperative than I would prefer, and on those days I use the stairs with the railing and I take my time. Manny knows, Mrs. Reyes knows, the people around me know, and they factor it in, quietly, without making it a performance of accommodation. That, too, is a thing I did not expect and which I value more than I can easily explain. Thomas and Diane came in January, 10 days. I had been in Cebu 8 months by then, and I realize now, a little nervous. Cebu had become mine. The coffee shop, Father Ignacio, Aling Cora, the Bougainvillea, Manny, Ate Belen. I wasn't sure what it would look like through their eyes. Thomas is an engineer, which means he evaluates things systematically. He walked the neighborhood on the first morning, quietly. He checked the safety of the building, the railing, the stairs, the layout, the width of the stairwell. He found the hospital and walked around the outside of it with an expression I recognized as approval. He asked Ronnie detailed questions about emergency transport, and Ronnie answered them all with the directness of someone who had been asked before. He ate at Aling Cora's twice, and told her on the second visit that her adobo was the best thing he'd had in recent memory. She laughed and gave him extra rice. Diane watched more than she evaluated. She watched me at the coffee shop with Father Ignacio. She watched me navigate the market on Tuesday morning, slowly, with my bag, stopping to select tomatoes with the attention of someone who has learned which ones are worth selecting. She watched me at the waterfront restaurant on Friday evening, at my standing table, with my standing order arriving without my asking. On the sixth evening she said, "You're comfortable here," not as a question. I said I was. She said, "I can see that. I can actually see it." On the eighth day, Thomas and I were sitting on the balcony in the morning, the Bougainvillea below us, the city starting its day, Pandesal on the table between us, coffee made. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I thought you were running away from something." I waited. He said, "Now I think you were running toward something." I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to add. He extended their stay by 2 days. He and Ronnie exchanged contact information. He ate Aling Cora's adobo a third time, and she put extra on the plate without being asked, because she had already taken his measure. He cried a little at the airport. Not sad crying, the kind where the relief and the love and the complexity of the whole thing are all too much to hold separately, and so they come out together. I held his hand and told him to bring the girls next time. He said he would. I believe him. My ordinary day now looks like this. I am up by 6. I make coffee in the kitchen, the strong local kind, from beans I buy at the market, the same way Ruth made coffee, though she would have had opinions about my method. I take the cup to the balcony. The Bougainvillea is there. The city is starting its morning. You can hear it, slowly, the tricycles beginning, a radio somewhere, a dog, someone's gate. I sit probably 30 or 40 minutes, I think. I read. Some mornings I write letters to my grandchildren, actual paper letters, because I believe they should know how to read them and how to write them, and because I have more to say to them from here than I did from Fort Wayne, which I did not predict, and which I find I'm grateful for. At 8, I walk to V. Rama. Father Ignacio is usually there before me. We argue about things we both know are not truly arguable, and we enjoy it. Late morning, the market or Ate Belen's, whatever the day requires. Aling Cora for lunch. The afternoon is mine. The balcony, a book, a letter, a video call with Thomas on Sundays. On Fridays, the waterfront. On Saturdays, whatever is happening, I am not waiting for anything. That is the change I notice most. In Fort Wayne, those last 2 years alone, there was a quality of waiting about everything. Not waiting for anything specific, just waiting for the next thing, moving through days without quite inhabiting them. Here I inhabit the days. They have shape. They have people in them. They have a bougainvillea that I notice every morning as if I have not seen it before, which I think is the correct way to notice a thing. If you are the person I was when Diane sat down at my kitchen table with that folder, looking at a number that doesn't add up, feeling like the options have narrowed to things you didn't choose, I want to say something directly. There is more than one answer. The folder on the table is one answer. There are others. The math of this particular answer is real, and I have run it carefully, and it works, and it leaves money over instead of running a deficit. The life that comes with it is a genuine one, full of people and food and conversation and small daily surprises and a bougainvillea in a courtyard that is more purple than anything has a right to be. You do not have to do it the way I did it. Visit first. Go with someone. Choose a different city. Do more research. Talk to more people. I did all of those things and I recommend them. What I do not recommend is sitting in a room that costs $6,200 a month, telling yourself there is no other way. There is another way. I am 81 years old and I am living it. If this found you at the right moment, the like button is below, and it matters more than it should to how this reaches people who need it. Subscribe if you want to stay with the story. The honest move. Everything I know and found out and got wrong the first time. The link is in the description. And come visit the Philippines sometime. Ask for Aling Cora's on the side street in La Hug. Tell her Sir Harold sent you. She'll give you extra rice.